Hello! Welcome to the most exciting part of a new project, planning and research. If you're looking to reignite some love for an old and forgotten project, this might be of some use, so stick around for a very wordy vlog. Recently, someone told me that research and planning is actually a dopamine-seeking activity. And this, I think, explains why I was so manically researching this project last year and not proceeded as much with the story. Last year, I was writing two sister novellas together, and I gave a majority of my attention to project Occult Cafe, and that project I consider finished or nearly finished if I get any other feedback, and and I want to write the sister project more or less this year, the project called Shimmer House, and I talked about both of them about a year ago really. Occult Cafe project I would compare to cozy, gothic, fairy tale or mystery, but I realized that there is not a lot of mystery solving in a way that we know who the culprit is pretty early on, so I usually try to sell it now as a fairy tale. Um, and it was based in a coffee shop, as you can tell, and it was based in London. It had a very small cast, and it was. I like to compare the Occult Cafe to like Emily Dickinson vibes, while I actually compare the sister novella to like Zelda Fitzgerald vibes. That's how I sort of had it in my mind. So like the voice was always pretty strong on what kind of voice I should be using for it. So Shimmer House is actually a cozy horror novella. So that's why I say they are sisters, because we're both supposed to be semi-cozy and semi-gothic like vibes. And Project Shimmer House is actually about I just learned this term renovation fantasy or something like that. So it is about renovation and about haunted house, which I've never written a haunted house story before or anything adjacent to horror, so it's really a learning point for me. However, I already had in my mind quite a lot of things what I wanted to this novella to be. So I didn't do the usual planning that I do for other novels and novellas, but I was just starting to get my rhythm of my usual process. After I was writing like a big fantasy project, it kind of drilled this new process in me, where I kind of have to have like a separate document of all the information on planning and detailing, which was rather different based in some other projects I've done in the past. So since I haven't done this work for Shimmer House, despite I have zero draft already, as I'm editing, actually it's really helpful to have that kind of file, because it can trigger new ideas. And usually at this level, when I'm already having the first drafts down, I tend to have another slow burner project, and this time I don't have one. So we can go all into Shimmer House. So I went back to look at the Occult Cafe project file of the details, and I realized how many things have changed. And it's really interesting to reflect back that even some of the character names have changed, because it's usually this kind of file is done very early, as like in the planning section, and it doesn't always keep up with the same in the same way. It doesn't always keep up with the same characters, with the same, even with the same character, let's say, flaws and like goals and things. Everything could change if I feel like it makes the story stronger. And my biggest message all the time when I'm editing is, did it make it better than it was? Even if it's not the best result, if it made it better than it was, it's moving forward, you know, it's a great accomplishment. Now, last year I read so many books to research Shimmer House. I knew that it is gonna be very 1920s, 1930s or Fitzgerald inspired, even if it's not directly about Fitzgerald's or not directly using any of that detail. It was very adjacent to the story. And the funny thing is that last year, and I'm kind of regretful I didn't finish the book last year and try to sell it. So last year in April actually was 100 years anniversary of novel of Great Gatsby novel. And the other fun thing is, you know, we have obviously Taylor Swift album landed with Life of a Showgirl, and I was like, oh, it's clearly the same vibes, and I feel like I missed some kind of window and now it looks like an afterthought. But obviously I still want to finish it, even if it's not quite timely aligned with, you know, the right time to come out in public. I still want to finish it because I'm still very excited to write it. Another important part was that I left this novella specifically for this year. I didn't rush to finish it or give it the most attention, even though I started a little while ago. It's because I knew that we're gonna be moving out. We're gonna be moving, and we moved into Canada, and I knew we're gonna have our own stressors of renovation, our own stressors of, you know, dealing with property and so on. So I thought it would be very nice to write it close to life and adjacent, because I thought that stress will give me some ideas to put into the novel. And I really like, I don't know if that can be called method writing, but really like to having my life quite adjacent in some ways, reading the books that are adjacent, watching the shows that are adjacent, and just soaking all that goodness in. Last year I read Zelda, Her Voice in Paradise, Simi Waltz, which is Zelda's novel, another Zelda's biography. Also read a novelization, Call Me Zelda. I believe I also read another Fitzgerald's novel, just to sort of expand on that world. But today I am reading Dear Scott and Dear Zelda, and one of the biggest messages that I have from this, which with other sources that I already read last year, was that they only show Zelda's letters. Mostly, I'm only, you know, halfway through, but most of the letters put in the book are actually showing Zelda's point of view, and we don't have a lot of letters left from Scott. And to me it feels like it might have been censored, because reading other books it was very clear that we both were harming each other with words. We both were very toxic, and knowing only Zelda's letters, we can see when she is lovely and we can see when her letters are not so lovely, but we don't see some of those mean responses from Scott, which I think, to me, it felt a bit curated. I don't know if it's gonna come and there's gonna be more of those letters later, or is it true that there's only a few maybe left. But we have a lot of view from Zelda's point and Zelda's thinking, and it doesn't help her to keep her grace, let's say. In other sources that I read, obviously Scott was very much indulging into alcohol, and he was also very, in a way, overprotective and possessive. At the same time, he would blame her for some of his traits, and he's a bit narcissistic, and and he would need that sort of attention, and she would need attention too. So we both had a little bit of a similar um, characters, and we would clash. Zelda might have had a bit more impulsiveness, a bit more whims, a bit more moving through different hobbies, but in a way, their characters were just clashing constantly, and I think that was just worsening her, mental health in general. And she had some letters from other sources. I remember she had some letters where she was just begging, "Can you just release me from, asylum or sanatorium where she was staying? Can you just release me? And let's be divorced. Let's just be our separate ways." And I think that's where we know that Scar was overprotective and thinking that she won't survive. And I like how she was described sometimes like just as a guest on Earth, like a visitor on Earth, where she wouldn't really manage. She wouldn't manage to live normal life, an adult life with her character. That was basically what was imposed. That she needed certain care and certain even objects to entertain her. And I like finding a lot of interesting words and comparisons. And Zelda was a writer clearly, and their language was a bit flowery, but at the same time unexpected. And another one of inspirations was that I really like rewatching is Z, the beginning of everything, because I also like her narration. She just perfectly puts that like voice, and generally their characters I think very well represented, and even the words we tend to use, and the way we tend to speak I think is kind of represented in that show. Now I wanted to show you how Zelda's letter sometimes sounds, and I like discovering these little pieces of wonderful writing. The horizon lies over the road to Lausanne, and the succulent feels like a guillotine, and the moon bleeds over the water, and you are not so far away that I can't smell your hair in the drying breeze. Darling, I love these velvet nights. I've never been able to decide whether the night was a bitter enemy or a grand patron, or whether I love you most in the eternal classic half-lights where it blends with day, or in the full religious fanfare of midnight, or perhaps in the looks of noon. Anyway, I love you, and you phone me just because you phoned me tonight. I walked on those telephone wires for 2 hours after holding your love like a parasol to balance me. So, those comparisons of moon bleeding over the water and the horizon is just a guillotine. And it feels nice for me to like really imagine, how she must have seen it. And as you can see, she was a bit also muddled in the ways where she was like, I don't know when I love you the most, or is it, is this night as a patron or an enemy? You can tell there is a duality in her letters where she knows that sometimes, her feelings might have shifted as well for him. And sometimes letters are angry, and sometimes we write to each other that we never loved each other, and it's very hurtful. And a lot of times come because we hurt each other somehow already, and obviously it comes as an angry response. I wanted to show another creative exercise that is, adjacent to research and can be helpful, but can also burn quite a bit of time, but I will recommend trying it. So I made a mood board, which is less of a mood board, but more of like an info dump as I was researching, style a little bit, but mostly, as you can see, it was about decor and elements in the house, because currently my house walls are all empty. There was no furniture, and it feels a little bit, again, not cinematic enough to show how characters interact with the house itself. I found that finding old clippings of catalogs are kind of fun because they might be accurate if they published in a similar place. They might be completely out of trend if it's in a different place. So, I just put a bunch of curiosities in that I might use or might not use, and just trying to make it authentic because even the phones in that gap of 1920s and to 1930s changed in style. So also deciding which kind of phone the owners would have had. There are some clippings that have house planning as well. And also, there are things that are difficult for me to determine of actual age and difficult sometimes to even find the images that I would might want to consider. So such as like I really want to put a minibar, but I could only find a modern remake of Art Deco minibar and so on. So this is more for me to be able to like flesh out the house itself. The importance is that this can go in such a deep rabbit hole to every detail, like wallpaper, curtains, and so on. But it can also trigger new ideas or new considerations that might
And
have not
okay,
been in
I
your
wanted to go
mind.
through the planning section really. How I usually plan these days my novels, often I really rely strongly on like colors and vibes and aesthetic feeling, I guess, to it. And that's been at least last 3 projects, starting with Project Amber. And I also was making playlists of music, which I didn't do before. And I think that Project Amber was the real first one where I put music to each chapter, just for the vibes, and also even color palettes. So I was imagining it very cinematically, and each chapter had to cinematically then change. So the color palette we end the chapter with should then smoothly move in a similar color palette to start from, change in the middle, and then sort of finish with something else. So it was sort of like in these strips of cinematic images in my head. While I didn't do the coloring for novellas, I seem to actually have made a playlist. So I made for Occult Cafe, I made a playlist, but I didn't follow it through with the music. So in the beginning when I was still drafting, I think I was listening to it to sort of give me vibes and ideas, but at the editing stage I completely lost it and it became something else, like irrelevant. For Shimmer House I made a playlist and I don't think I listened to it once, maybe once, I don't know. But the songs that might match the vibes in the novella from that playlist might be Florence and the Machine, The Bomb, because it does have that sort of, I don't know how to say it, it does have the vibes of it, but also the setting is at the seaside and it does remind me of a seaside somehow with music. So far that's the closest one. And the other one that I like to compare the novella to is uh, Taylor Swift, Death by a Thousand Cuts, because it really stands where the novella's core is. It's about relationships comparison to the house, let's say. So, it's the same core as is in the song, even though I didn't add it to the playlist that I made then. But this constantly comes to my mind as a comparison. So that's the first thing I do, is usually a song list recently. And then I also try to make a file that I'm just calling the file in making or creating this and that, like so creating Shimmer House or writing Shimmer House, and try to put those details down. So currently don't have a lot on there, but I know that we have voices and the narrative is in dual voices, as same was in the other novella. So there's a consistency. So in this novella, in other novella, it was 2 characters that act adjacently one to each other. In this novella, it's a 1920s letters, so it's also epistolary novella in a way, which again I never written in letters. Oh, actually,
lying. It's diary. It's a diary, no letter, sorry. My mind got too attached to the book we were reading. So it's a diary, and then from that time, from the lady who lived in the house, and then we have a main character who moves into this house. Now, the other part that I do is setting. So last time it was modern London-based setting. This time we actually writing, and you know, nothing is a secret because it's very, very predictable how I chose locations and how I chose the setting. Is Long Island. It's a fictional place in Long Island, and I like those kind of Easter eggs, and I feel like if people would read and recognize what feels similar, they would, and if we know it, they also would feel like it's a very nice detail. So yeah, so we place it in Long Island, and we're still doing a modern time, but a fictional place, except when we do the diary parts. And then I do the part where I describe the characters. I also tend to spend a long time researching location, and recently, same with the Project Umber, the location became as a character, and I don't see other people doing that as much, but it somehow feels like it's internally important for me to give as much attention to location as I do to characters. And in that Project Amber, every building was its own character in a way that we had its own background, history, the way we looked, and you know what we were used for. So you know, we all were very different. And again, I don't remember what it was called, but there was a Netflix show about space, like an animation where it was alien planet, and the entire show was really shook me in a way that the planet was a character. There was much more important things happening in the planet, in the plants and fauna, than within people who arrived. So it's really, for me, it feels like a fresh view take to actually like make the buildings the characters themselves. So last novella, a lot of things take in coffee shops, so that's why it's kind of cozy. And this one is actually obviously going to be the house. So you know, I'm not even spoiling a lot of details in a way that is very predictable choices. And then I started making character lists, and I was even drawing my own characters for other novels and novellas, where I was like drawing, this is what I want my character to look, and that really got me go much deeper into them. I haven't done any of that for Shimmer House. One of my favorite parts is making the dualities and making a circle, because obviously hero's journey is some kind of a circle. So how the character will change through the story, and what the important points in that circle is for this character. And I often like reversing someone else's cycle, or making dualities of viewpoints that's gonna change. So if one character begins, let's take a simple example. If one character begins very rich, and then we see them going downward spiral into becoming very poor at the end, and then the other character starts very poor, and we see them going opposite cycle in becoming very rich. That would be just like a very simple example, but usually it is more about like moral code or beliefs that we change rather than, you know, statuses. Okay. Additionally, I reread The Anatomy of Story, because the first time I read it, I thought it had so many good ideas, but it didn't add significantly a lot to my planning. Okay. So in the last reread of this book, actually, I think my biggest takeaway is that you always find in those books that are writing based or research based the things you are looking for at that time, and you would always find paying more attention to something you're actually looking for. So in this state, I was thinking about fake ally opponent, and fake opponent ally was one of the things I hooked on, and was thinking about, can I expand that more characters to expand this trope.
So that was one of the aspects from rereading this. And the second aspect was looking into the actions as not the ways to find them, well, in a way finding the need and seeking the need, or like following the quest or whatever we usually do, but also thinking of how can I make it to become immoral actions, even if it's not significantly moral, you know, we're not killing a human or anything like that. How can we make that every decision is somehow immoral and clearly you know it's not completely right, and it's almost like a tragic hero because you know that a hero has to do it, but it is not completely right. But you also have to understand why the hero chooses it. So you know, I wanted to look from a perspective of immoral actions, and much more focus on why is it wrong and why is it right at the same time. So these are two things I picked up from rereading it. Though last time I thought I liked, you know, entire sections. So I think because I'm at that stage of writing where these things were more important for drafting my story. So next part is really me sketching the outline, the architecture of the house, because I actually had not even imagined fully how the house looks from the front. I just knew a few details I wanted in the house or around the house, a few details that were important to me at that moment. But now I'm expanding to understand how the house flows. So I'm just drawing, starting from one detail that is important to me is that the hallway has to basically be an escape route. It has to really like you could entering, you could see through entire hallway and you could see where the back door is. So you know your way to run. I don't, you know, I'm not an architect. I don't think it's structurally sound, but I just gone with what I would like to see in this house. I had to resketch it a few times to really understand how what is important to my characters. So, for example, living room is completely consumed by the library and the parlor because we are either party or work people, so writing and partying. And then I think the other notice that I had is that the door flow is very important too, because depending which direction the door opens, you can have completely different feel. For example, if you want to, you know, trap yourself in the room, if it's or opens internally into inside, then it's easier for someone to break in and force their way in. So I think that was another aspect that I thought about. For upstairs right now, the biggest thing for me was the need that the bedroom is directly above the library, uh, because the library is obviously the writer's space, and then the bedroom is where the writer's wife can hear him clacking away. I don't know all the details just yet, and some of these things might change, but it's really nice to go into the project having a map. So at least you don't need to think how your character stumbles and where is it gonna appear next. You have some sort of structure already
So
in
this is
front
all
of
for
you.
today, and I'm hoping that this project will, you know, keep rolling and become something bigger. I'm really glad that despite I've been having a lot of writing breaks in the past year, I still managed to finish one project a year. So means, you know, I do it very manically in a short bursts, and then I have the bigger breaks, but I come back and do it very manically again, which still gives a lot of time and love to each of these creative endeavors, and I think I would love to continue with that. Even if the genres become shorter like novellas, I would love to continue with that. This is for this vlog, and I hope you enjoyed my process, and you know, tell me any other resources I can use or any other flicks of inspiration, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.